Most women have no idea just how deeply they can live inside a man's mind without ever touching him. There are certain feminine secrets, silent, invisible forces, that haunt him long after she has left the room. They are not tricks, nor shallow manipulations, but the echoes of ancient archetypes that his unconscious cannot turn away from. Carl Jung once said that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. And the feminine, when she carries her truth, becomes the alchemist of his inner world. The first secret is the mystery of restraint, not the absence of desire, but the mastery of it. Men are tormented not by women who give everything too easily, but by those who can feel the pull of the moment and still choose to hold back. This is not a game, it is a form of self-respect so deeply embedded in the psyche that it whispers, "I will not give my essence to one who has not earned it." In the male unconscious, this restraint awakens the pursuit, not out of ego, but because something in him senses he is standing before a gate to a hidden realm. And gates that open too easily are rarely remembered. The second is the feminine ability to see into a man without speaking it aloud. It is the quiet knowing that unsettles him, the way she can hold his gaze and make him feel both exposed and understood. Jung would call this an encounter with the anima, the inner feminine that a man has been seeking all his life. But when the real feminine stares back at him in the outer world, it forces him to confront parts of himself he has avoided. He may even resist her presence, yet he cannot erase the way she made him feel like he was seen without the armor. Then there is the secret of self-possession, a woman whose identity is not shaped by his attention. She exists as a complete world before he arrives, and she will remain one after he leaves. This is a rare thing in the age of constant validation, and it unsettles a man because it contradicts his hidden assumption that he must be the center of her emotional universe. A self-possessed woman becomes a mirror, not of his dominance, but of his smallness when faced with her vast inner life. And though his ego might protest, something deeper in him is drawn toward her gravity. The fourth is the sacred distance she keeps even in closeness. This is not coldness, but a quiet boundary that says, "You may walk beside me, but you may not own me." Men feel this as an ache, an unresolvable tension that makes them lean forward, always wanting to close the gap. It is the paradox of intimacy: the closer she allows him, the more he becomes aware of the part of her he can never reach. This is not cruelty, it is the truth of the soul. No one can fully possess another, and the feminine who understands this becomes unforgettable because she does not dilute the mystery in an attempt to please. And finally, the secret that lingers long after she is gone, her silence. Not the silence of withdrawal, but the silence of strength. A woman who can walk away without explanation terrifies a man far more than one who shouts her reasons. For in her silence, he is left alone with his own thoughts, forced to confront why she no longer needed to speak. This silence becomes a ghost in his mind, whispering questions he cannot answer, replaying moments he cannot rewrite. Jung might say that in such silence, she becomes a projection screen for his own shadow, the part of himself he least wants to face. You may not realize it, but these secrets are not learned in books or passed down in words. They are born from a woman's journey inward, from her willingness to sit with her own shadow until she knows her worth so fully that she no longer bleeds it out in the hope of being chosen. When she lives in this state, she does not chase, and she does not cling, yet she is remembered. Not for what she gave, but for what she carried within herself. And the men who encounter such a woman, they never truly leave her behind. She becomes a permanent fixture in the corridors of their memory, a haunting they may not even wish to escape. The haunting begins subtly, like the lingering scent of perfume that clings to a room long after the woman has left. At first, the man doesn't notice it, he tells himself he is too rational, too disciplined, to be moved by something so intangible. Yet the mind has its own language, and the unconscious is fluent in symbols he cannot consciously decode. Jung warned that what is not made conscious returns later as fate. And so the memory of her presence begins to weave itself into his days, not as a deliberate obsession, but as a shadow following him just out of sight. For the feminine who holds her own center, the haunting is not a calculated act. She does not seek to live rent-free in his thoughts, she simply exists in her own fullness, and in doing so, she awakens in him the dormant archetypes he has neglected. The maiden, the lover, the queen, these are not just romantic ideals, but inner figures in his psyche, each carrying a fragment of his own soul. When she embodies these energies, she is not merely a woman in his life, she becomes a living key to the locked chambers within himself. And he cannot unknow the places she has led him. The male ego is accustomed to control, to shaping the narrative and holding dominion over his own desires. But the haunting presence of the feminine operates outside his control. It stirs a disquiet he cannot name, the quiet ache of knowing there is something about her that will never be his to own. This is where the power lies, not in withholding affection, but in holding the mystery as sacred. A woman who has done her shadow work knows that revealing everything too quickly is not generosity, but self-abandonment. And so she reveals herself slowly, like the phases of the moon, each glimpse deepening the hunger without ever satisfying it fully. You, too, may have felt this paradox within yourself, the pull to be known, the safety in being hidden. When a man encounters a woman who can dwell in that tension without collapsing into neediness, he experiences a truth that both fascinates and unsettles him: she is not afraid of her own company. In a world addicted to constant reassurance, this is revolutionary. Over time, the haunting transforms. What began as attraction becomes a mirror for his inadequacies. Her self-possession exposes his dependence on external affirmation. Her emotional discipline challenges his own volatility. And the more she refuses to be owned, the more he realizes that ownership was never the point, connection was. But connection without control feels, to the unprepared man, like standing before the ocean, beautiful, boundless, and utterly beyond command. Men rarely confess how much the feminine mystique disturbs their internal order. They may joke about it, dismiss it, or bury it under casual encounters, but the truth is that some women mark them at the level of the soul. This is not about beauty, or status, or charm. It is about the psychic resonance between two beings whose archetypes recognize each other before the conscious mind can intervene. She calls to the part of him he has neglected, the dreamer, the poet, the seeker. And while the surface man may retreat, the inner man keeps listening for her voice in the silence. The haunting is not without its danger. For a man unready to meet himself, such a woman can become an obsession, a fixation he both craves and resents. He may try to diminish her, to reduce her to a flaw, to convince himself she was never as rare as he felt she was. But the unconscious does not lie, and his attempts to erase her only deepen the imprint. Like an unfinished sentence, her memory lives inside him, demanding completion. And for the woman? This is where her discipline matters most. The haunting is not her weapon, it is a side effect of living in her power. To use it intentionally for control is to step into the territory of the manipulative shadow, a place where authenticity is sacrificed for dominance. But when she carries her presence without the need to prove it, she becomes something far more enduring, a catalyst. Men may come and go, but the changes she triggers in their inner world will ripple far beyond her presence. What she leaves behind is not always love, nor even longing, but an awakening, a sense that they have seen a glimpse of something higher, and must now decide whether to rise toward it or retreat into the comfort of their old selves. The most potent hauntings are not born from romance, but from confrontation with truth. A woman anchored in her own depth becomes a mirror, and mirrors do not lie. When a man meets such a woman, he is not merely meeting her, he is meeting himself in her reflection. And this is where the disturbance truly begins, for the reflection she offers is often not the one he wishes to see. Carl Jung understood this intimately: every man carries a shadow, the unacknowledged and often disowned parts of his nature. The feminine who has faced her own shadow becomes a rare force in his life because she will not absorb his. She will not carry the weight of his unresolved wounds just to keep the peace. Instead, she holds her ground and lets him see the dissonance between who he thinks he is and who he truly is. For some men, this is intoxicating, for others, unbearable. But for all, it is unforgettable. The haunting deepens because she does not move in reaction to him. In a culture where emotional reactivity is mistaken for connection, her calm is both alluring and unnerving. If he shouts, she does not match his volume. If he withdraws, she does not chase. If he tries to provoke, she meets him with stillness. This does not mean she is passive, it means she is sovereign. Her emotional world is her own kingdom, and trespassers are met not with rage, but with gates that close without noise. You may not realize how much men test for reaction, how their unconscious gauges a woman's stability by how easily she can be thrown off balance. A woman who meets these tests with composure is not playing hard to get, she is living in alignment with her value. And that composure plants a question in his mind that no flattery can answer: if she can stand so firmly without me, who might she become with me? But here lies the paradox: the very independence that draws him to her also exposes his own fragility. When a woman is not dependent on his presence for her sense of worth, it dismantles the unspoken power dynamics he has been conditioned to expect. She is not his prize to win, nor his possession to keep. She is a force that moves with or without him, and that realization can be both awe-inspiring and terrifying. Men speak often of wanting mystery, but mystery unsettles them because it resists conquest. And when the feminine holds her mystery without apology, she is not creating scarcity for manipulation's sake, she is honoring the natural truth that the soul is infinite and cannot be fully known. Jung called this the numinous, that which stirs reverence and even fear because it transcends the ordinary. In the presence of such a woman, a man is reminded of the sacred, and sacred things cannot be owned. Her words linger, not because they are sweet, but because they are precise. She does not waste speech to fill silences or soften truths. Every sentence carries the weight of her clarity, and this weight lodges in his mind like a stone in a riverbed, reshaping the current over time. He may argue, deny, even ridicule in the moment, but later, alone, he will hear her voice again, not as noise, but as truth echoing through the caverns of his thoughts. And perhaps most haunting of all is that she does not need to be present for her influence to remain. He will see her in other women, but not find her essence. He will hear her in the cadence of strangers' voices, but not match her depth. He will search unconsciously for her energy in every new encounter, not realizing that what he seeks is not a replacement, but the part of himself she awakened. For the awakened feminine, this is not a performance. She does not craft herself to be remembered, she simply refuses to live in amnesia of her own worth. She knows that her role is not to complete a man, nor to wait for one to understand her fully, but to remain faithful to her own becoming. Those who cross her path may be changed, some will resent her for it, others will silently thank her. But all will remember. The haunting is rarely about her beauty alone. Beauty, after all, is everywhere, and the world is full of faces that can hold a man's gaze. What lingers is the way she altered the very atmosphere around him. With her, the air felt different, denser, charged, as though some invisible force pulled his attention inward, making him aware of his own heartbeat. This is the mark of the feminine who carries herself not as a decoration, but as a presence. She is not performing for the gaze, she is rooted in her own reality, and that reality bends the field of every room she enters. Carl Jung often wrote of the anima as a guide to a man's inner transformation. But the anima is not always gentle. Sometimes she appears as the storm that tears down the structures he built to protect his ego. A woman who embodies her own depth does not deliberately set out to dismantle a man's defenses, but her existence makes them obsolete. He cannot remain numb in her presence, she makes him feel. And feeling, for the unprepared man, is dangerous. It threatens the order he has worked to maintain, the control that defines his identity. Her haunting power also lies in the contradictions she holds without apology. She can be soft without being weak, open without being naive, nurturing without being self-erasing. This confuses a man conditioned to believe in binaries, that a woman must be either gentle or strong, submissive or independent. She embodies both, and in doing so, she dismantles the simple categories he relies on to understand people. This collapse of certainty forces him into the unknown, and the unknown has a way of living rent-free in the mind. You may have felt this in yourself. the way your complexity unsettles those who crave clarity at the expense of truth. The men who seek only comfort will turn away from it, but those who sense there is something to be learned will remain in orbit, even if they keep their distance. There is also the haunting of her absence. When she leaves, whether by choice or by circumstance, she does not leave breadcrumbs for him to follow. There is no dramatic farewell, no endless messages explaining herself, no theatrical display of loss. She departs in the same way she lived, with intention. And this is where the male mind begins its restless spiral. The lack of closure is not cruelty, it is reality. Life rarely gives neat endings, and she will not pretend otherwise. In her absence, he must confront the parts of himself that wanted to possess her rather than understand her. Jung taught that projections must be withdrawn for true individuation to occur. Her disappearance forces him to do just that. Without her physical presence, the fantasies and illusions he cast upon her are revealed for what they were, his own creations. Yet even when the projection dissolves, the essence remains, the memory of being in the presence of a woman who lived by her own gravity. The haunting deepens when he sees her thriving without him. She does not linger in the shadow of what was, she steps fully into what is. This is not an act of revenge, nor a performance for his benefit. It is simply the natural continuation of her path. But to the man who once believed himself central to her story, it is a revelation he cannot easily digest. She was never orbiting him, he was passing through her sky. Men will often try to explain away this kind of woman, to reduce her to a lucky encounter or a passing phase. But explanation is the mind's attempt to tame the untamable. What haunts them is that no matter how they frame it, they know deep down she was real. She was not a fantasy, not a dream, not an act. She was the embodiment of something they had only glimpsed in fragments, and they may never find it again. And so, whether they admit it or not, they carry her with them. In quiet moments, in dreams they cannot name, in the way they hesitate when meeting someone new, as if searching for that same frequency. But the truth they rarely speak aloud is this: once a man has met such a woman, the world never feels quite the same. Some hauntings fade with time, dissolving like mist under the sun. But the haunting born of the awakened feminine does not dissolve, it transforms. It becomes a hidden compass in a man's life, pointing always towards something greater than his current self, even if he resists its direction. Jung knew this well: the psyche will call a man toward wholeness through any means necessary, even through the memory of a woman he can never forget. She lives in his mind not as a constant ache, but as a quiet question: what was it about her? He may try to answer it in the language of appearance, timing, or circumstance, but none of those explanations satisfy. The truth is that it was not what she gave him, but what she refused to surrender, her center. She could love without losing herself, give without emptying, be close without being consumed. This balance is rare, and once seen, it cannot be unseen. Her haunting is also her liberation. Because she does not bind herself to being remembered, she is free. She is not trapped in his story, nor is she defined by his longing. She walks forward with the same grace she had when he first met her, carrying no weight that is not hers. This detachment is not coldness, it is wisdom, the understanding that love can exist without possession, connection without permanence. You may feel the temptation to believe that haunting a man's mind is a form of power to be pursued. But that is the shadow's hunger, the need for validation dressed as sovereignty. True feminine power is not about living rent-free in someone's thoughts, it is about living rent-free in your own, unburdened by the need for external confirmation. The haunting, when it happens, is simply a byproduct of that freedom. For the man, the memory of her becomes a measure, a silent yardstick by which he evaluates his future encounters. Without even realizing it, he will compare others to her, not in superficial traits, but in the depth of their presence, the steadiness of their energy, the way they hold themselves in moments of tension. And though he may never find her twin, he will carry her influence like a watermark on the pages of his life. And for her, the story ends long before it ends for him. She will have walked away from the connection not as a loss, but as a completed chapter. She understands that not every meeting is meant to last, some are meant to awaken, to disrupt, to break the illusion that love is about possession. She will have left without needing him to see her worth, because she has already seen it herself. This is the final secret, the one that binds all the others. The woman who truly haunts a man is not trying to. She is not performing, not manipulating, not curating herself for his approval. She is simply living as the fullest expression of her own being, unafraid of solitude, unafraid of silence, unafraid of being misunderstood. In her presence, he caught a glimpse of what it means to be whole. In her absence, he realizes how far he still has to go. And so the haunting remains, not as a curse, but as an invitation. It is the echo of a higher possibility, the whisper of a standard that cannot be lowered once it has been felt. Men may resist it, deny it, even try to bury it, but deep down, it becomes part of them. In that way, she is never truly gone. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.